Welcome to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, a podcast to encourage, educate, and equip you to care for children and youth through adoption, foster, and kinship care. Hosted by an adoptive mom with over 22 years of kinship and adoptive parenting experience. She's on this journey with you. Please welcome Sandra Flach.
The Lord is my shepherd. I have everything I need. He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. He guides me along right paths, bringing honor to his name. Even when I walk through the dark valley of death, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect me and comfort me. You prepare a feast for me in the presence of my enemies. You welcome me as a guest, anointing my head with oil. My cup overflows with blessing. Surely your goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever. Of course, that is Psalm 23, a favorite of our guest today. Welcome to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey. I'm Sandra Flach. It is my honor to encourage you and equip you for your parenting journey. I am a mom of 8 mostly grown kiddos, 3 bios, 1 kinship, and 4 joined our family through international adoption. So I've been on this parenting journey for quite a while, nearly 3 decades. So not a stranger to childhood trauma. Also, my 2 youngest, who are now young adults, are both diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome. So I get it, right? And I want this podcast to be a resource for you, an invaluable resource to help you along your parenting journey. So I hope that you will find it that way. And hey, if you've been listening for a while and it is an encouragement and it is a resource to you, shoot me an email. My email address is in the show notes below. I receive each one and I respond to each one. So I would love to hear from you. So please try to do that. And also, again, a reminder to like and follow our new social media pages. The Adoption and Foster Care Journey is on Instagram at AFC_Journey. And we're also on Facebook at the Adoption and Foster Care Journey. So I would love to connect with you there. And also, I would love to meet you in person. This fall, I will be at the Christian Alliance for Orphans annual CAFO Summit. This year, we are going to be in Houston, Texas, October 1st through 3rd. I will be leading a breakout session. They call it a, I'm leading a workshop. So it's a Better Together workshop is what they call it. So I'll be actually leading a workshop, speaking on FASD and encouraging parents there. We're also connecting in an FASD meetup. So we have a room that will be designated where a certain time in a certain place where all of us parents and caregivers on this FASD journey can connect together at CAFO. And I will also have an exhibitor booth with information and resources. So I would love to see you if you can get yourself to CAFO, as well as I will be at the Replanted Conference also in October, busy travel season this fall. Replanted is in Chicago, October 23rd through the 25th. Also, I will be doing a workshop there as well and have an exhibitor booth. So these conferences are just incredible opportunities if you are a parent or a caregiver. And if you're listening to this podcast, you probably are, but to be able to link arms with fellow foster and adoptive parents who are on the same journey, similar journeys as us, to get some wonderful teaching and gain resources and just be in community together. I highly recommend that you get to one of these conferences. I know they're challenging to get to, but you can do it. I mean, as a mom of 8 kids, I've been to CAFO, I have to say, and it's in a different city in the country every year. And I think I've been like 13 years in a row, not counting like 2020 for COVID, but it's just incredible. It's like 4,000 people gathering together in the space of adoption and foster care and orphan care ministry around the world. So it's just great opportunities. And Replanted is very much like a retreat for parents. So you'll just get your cup full at either one of those places. And of course, I would love to connect with you if you get out to any of those. And you have time to register because a lot of them are just opening up for early bird registration now. So hop on over. We have links in the show notes to where you can go to the websites and learn more and register for both CAFO Summit and Replanted. So anyway, shameless plug there. And we're going to get on to our guest today because I am super excited about our guest today because we have been friends for many, many years. And I'm excited for you to meet Sue Roseberger. Sue is an adoptive mom of 3 kids, ages 16, 17, 21. She'll fill us in. All adopted through foster care. One is diagnosed with an FASD. Sue is a member of our Hope for the FASD Journey support community. She also manages ReFurnishings, a furniture thrift store in upstate New York, which is an extension of Justice for Orphans, like this podcast is an extension of Justice for Orphans. So we're going to learn about all of the above, and I can't wait for you to meet her. Please welcome my friend, Sue Roseberger. Hey, Sue.
Hi, Sandra.
I am so excited to finally have you on the show. We've been friends for a long time. I don't know how many years. We could add it up. We met through
Yes.
homeschooling when you were first homeschooling your kids when they were little, I think it was.
Yes. Yes, we did. When Hope was, I think, in kindergarten and Nate was pre-K. So that was like 16 years ago or so, at least.
Oh my goodness. Time flies. So let's start at the beginning of your story, though. I always like to do that.
Okay.
Have 3 kiddos adopted through foster care. What led you and your husband, Doug, to pursue adoption?
Okay. Well, first of all, I got married a little late, I guess, by some standards. I was like 36 when we got married, and we wanted to start having a family right away. And it wasn't happening. And we also had determined that we didn't want to use extraordinary measures to make that happen. And so after about maybe 6 or 7 years, both my husband and that's actually where we met.
So, Sue, what led you and your husband, Doug, to pursue adoption?
Well, we got married in our 30s, and we wanted to have children right away. And we tried for a number of years. And we had also determined that we didn't want to use extraordinary measures to make that happen. So both of us having a background in case management, particularly with developmentally disabled. I worked mostly with developmentally disabled adults who were living in the community. And so I had a firsthand experience with Child Protective Services and also the foster care situation. So because sometimes some of those children of the parents that were on my caseload would need to be removed from their families and were put in foster care. And so I was familiar with the system. And in talking to them, they said that there was a real need for foster parents and foster and adoptive parents. And I saw one like foster become a kinship adoption. And so I was familiar with that. And so in praying about it with my husband, we decided that we would become foster parents with the intention of adopting. And so we went right straight to our local county and took what they called the MAPS class training. And we took that course, and it was 2 years before they actually gave us our first placement, because we wanted an infant or a young child, and we wanted someone who we knew would be freed for adoption. And so that's why it took so long, because we just didn't want to bring somebody in our home and have them go out again. And we wanted somebody who was going to be permanent in our home. So that's what took so long. But when I was working, and I got the phone call about this little girl. She was about 4 or 5 months old, and her name was Hope. And I'm like, we'll take her. And I'm like, wait a minute, I got to tell my husband first. So I called him, and he's like, well, yeah. And so I remember that this is where it like takes a village, because my church had been praying for Doug and I, to have children first, and then for the whole situation and for a child to come into our home. And when we finally found out that we were going to meet Hope, we were at our like weekly Bible study prayer meeting at our pastor's home. And one of our friends, he said, I have this vision of Hope. He knew her name was Hope then. I had a purple dress. And I'm like, well, she's only like, 4 or 5 months old. She's not going to walk. And so we're like, whatever. And so we go and we meet, and it's at Child Protective Services county office building in this really, in this conference room. It's an oversized conference table. You can barely walk around it. And it's like, and all of a sudden we're sitting there waiting. And they bring Hope in. Okay. And she's wearing a purple dress. And the caseworker takes her and props her up on the table and walks her across the table to us. And both Doug and I go, and they're like, what?
Because that was the vision that she would be
Yes,
walking.
that was the vision that he had.
Wow.
Was Hope walking towards us in a purple dress. Wow. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this was so God. And it's like, we still have the dress, of course.
Oh, wow. Does she know that story?
Oh yeah, she knows that story. And she's like, Mom, make sure you tell that story. So, that was the first time we met her. And, she was in a foster placement at the time in Schenectady. Was interesting because it was a family of color, and they really wanted to adopt her. And they're like, look it, you've adopted a bunch of kids, you're all the same, culture and so on. And it's like, let's give this family a chance. So, but they just loved her, and because she was a very good baby. And I learned later on why she was such a good baby, but I didn't know what I didn't know. But
how old was she when you adopted her formally?
Oh my goodness, that was a little rough. She had visitations with us for, from that time forward. She finally came into our home when she was about 8 months old. And she had visits with her biological mom initially, weekly or whatever, supervised visits on a regular basis, court back and forth. And the mom finally the court had to finally order her to give up parental rights. And Hope was 3 years old. And yeah, and by that time we had already gotten Nathan.
Oh, so so he's Nathan is Hope's brother. So
Yes.
tell us about that.
Okay, so, part of like going to court and stuff, I'm like, wait a minute, that mom's pregnant. But actually before that, right before that, Hope was about 2, and we're like, she's like sitting in the living room, playing quietly with herself or whatever. And it's like, and we're just loving on her, and she's making all of her milestones, and everything's hunky dory, everything's going great. And we're like, wouldn't it be nice if Hope had a sibling? And so we didn't even tell the county. They told us. They're like, well, all of a sudden we get a call, mom just had a baby. And we're like, oh, we're like, okay. And the father was in jail, and I guess he gave up parental rights, and the mom gave up parental rights, but I was still working full time. And I'm like, well, oh my gosh, I can't just immediately stop working. They'll give me family leave and stuff, but we need to plan a little bit. And so I asked them to place him in a Christian home, preferably for the first, for 3 months or whatever, until I could get him into daycare. So, because Hopi was in a really nice daycare, small, and so we got him at 3 months old, and that was Nathan. And he was, he was just a cute little bug, and very, very active. And from the get-go, they all had the same mom, but they had a different dad, so it wasn't the same dad as Hope's. And love at first sight.
And
But
then, so when did Rosie come into the picture? Because she's the third. They all
yes,
have the same mom, but she's your
right, yeah, right. Well, Nate, first of all, we were able to adopt him. I think he was like 18 months old. It went quick. They do like that whole year thing. I don't know why, but even though parental rights were terminated, it took for 18 months for us to get him officially adopted. So then we hadn't heard anything from mom. She pretty much had, fallen off the face of the earth, so to speak. And all of a sudden we got a call. I think we were actually celebrating like Easter or something like that. It was in the springtime. Nate had just turned 2, or was about to turn 2. And it was in March of 2009. And we got this call that mom had given birth yet again, and did we want her? And I'm like, absolutely. And by then I had become a stay-at-home mom, and so I was able to get her at 2 days old. And that had been the desire of my heart, to just have a baby from infancy, from like day 1. And so God really granted that blessing to us. And we really thought that we were going to adopt her. But because mom had given up parental rights, and we didn't know where dad was. But all of a sudden, dad came out of the woodwork and said that he wanted to work to get her back. And we just really held out hope that we would keep her.
How old was Rosie because her name wasn't Rosie when you
No,
had her.
because our last name is Roseberger, and we didn't want Rosie Roseberger. And so we were going to name her Pearl. And she was our little pearl of great price, so for sure. And so that's what we were calling her. That's what everybody was calling her. And we even had her dedicated at church as that, and so on and so forth. And but it was right after her first birthday that we had to go back to court, and she was going to be turned over. And it was really, really hard, because that whole day was just a mess, because I was a mess, obviously. And it wasn't the same judge that had been present for my other two kids. Who had, been there for the adoption of our kids and knew our story. It was a different judge. The caseworker had been called away who was familiar with our family. So it was a different caseworker. It wasn't even the same, they have a guardian ad litem. It was like the child's guardian. And that guardian had been pulled away. And so it was all people who knew nothing about our family, knew nothing about the fact that we had the other two siblings. And it was just like, bing, bang, boom, done. Here you go, give her back. And we're like, but wait. And we didn't even have an opportunity to speak. It was done. And they took her, and he took her away. And it was like a death. It was absolutely devastating that she was gone. And the father insisted that he would keep in contact with us, and he did for a little while. This was like in April of 2010, and a little bit here and there, some visits here and there. But then it was Christmas time in 2010. Actually, it was like New Year's. She had come for Christmas and stuff, and we had no idea. And he announced to us that he was moving to Virginia and that he was leaving the area. And we're like, and we knew that we probably weren't going to see her. And, we were devastated.
How old was she at this point?
She was almost, well, she was a year when they took her, and then that was like, 6 months later. So she was like 18 months or whatever. So, and so he moved and left, and then he let her come and visit from Virginia once that summer when she was 2. And already then she was like a feral animal. I mean, you expect certain things from, a 2-year-old regular, but she was just off the hook like crazy. And it's like, you didn't know what was going on, and she was biting, and she was, not eating, and her sleep was really disturbed. I mean, everything was just, crazy. And, part of it, I'm sure, was like, who are these people and why do you have me, and so on. And it was like 2.5 or 3 weeks. And I think by the end of by the last, 3 or 4 days, she started to calm down and, snuggle with me again and be a child again and be kind of normal, so to speak, just more restive and at peace, I think. And then she had to go, and that was it. And then we never saw her again for like 5.5 years.
So, and knowing what we know now, because I'm sure that you didn't have that understanding of attachment and all of that back then.
No.
But that first year of her life where she bonded with you, she was
Yes.
with you, you were mom, Doug was dad, and then all of a sudden removed and placed with her biological father, but he was really a stranger. And then there was back and forth, which had to be so confusing for a 2-year-old.
Yes.
Just the fear and the trauma that she was enduring, that you guys were going through. So she's gone for like 5 years.
Yeah.
And what happened?
6 years. Yeah. And then, we tried to like keep contact, and, we would call, and he would let her speak to us on the phone, but she told, she confessed that she didn't really understand who we were. And then she would call me mom. And then I guess she would get off the phone, and he would yell at her and punish her for calling me mom, that I wasn't mom, that I was Sue. But she had never called me Sue. I was always mom or mommy. And so even all those years, we tried to get together with them. We even tried to, we tried to plan some family trips to come down to Virginia and like take him to the zoo or do something. And he would always just bail out at the last minute, or he had family in New York and we would try to do something. He would always just bail on us and not do it. And so we got this phone call she had just turned 7. And I think again, it was like Easter time. And we had family at the house. Might have been for like Nate's birthday or whatever, because his was in early April. And it was this woman who I didn't know, and it was the father's significant other's adult daughter. And I guess they had removed Rosie and they had placed her with this woman. And she calls me out of the blue. I don't know how she got my number, probably from the other woman, and said, "You've got to take her. I can't handle her. She's a wild animal." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And then I finally got out of her that, she'd been removed and that she can't live with her dad anymore. And she's like, "I can't handle her." And so gratefully, knowing what I know about the system, that Monday, it was probably a Sunday, and that next day, first thing, I immediately found Child Protective Services in that town. And they're like, "Yeah, who are you?" And I'm like, "We are, we've adopted her siblings." And they're like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah." I was like, "We have her siblings, and we had her when she was a baby and she was taken away." And they were like, "Your kid," they were like, they're like, couldn't believe it, that they figured she didn't have family. That there was nothing. And so they were like amazed to realize that she had family, and then I checked with our Child Protective Services, our contacts, and they said in order for her to come up to us through the foster care system, she'd have to go into their foster care system for a year. And then she could be transferred to New York State. And I'm like, no, we're just, we're just gonna take her. And so we went down for a court hearing, and of course the father's denying anything. It's like, "You can't tell me how to discipline my child." And we're like, "Dude, we can." And we were able to get her, bring her back home. And then we went down in the fall and had the official court hearing, and we only got permanent legal custody of her. We don't have guardianship. He never ever gave up parental rights. He's refused to this day. He wouldn't ever give up parental rights. So she still has her given name, and Rose, and she has her mom's last name. She doesn't even have her biological father's last name. But and we've had her since she was 7, and she is 16 now.
And the trauma, though, that she endured and what you dealt with when she came home.
Yes.
Only can imagine the trauma and the fear and, how hard that was for her.
Yeah. She told me, because I was talking to her about this last night, and she's like, and I said, "So how did you feel?" And she's like, "I was petrified. I was terrified." She's like, "I didn't know you. I mean, I had a couple conversations with you on the phone, and all I remember is my dad telling me not to call you mom and being punished because I did." And she said she didn't know what to expect. She said when she knew that in her other home with her dad, she had no freedom. And she realized that in our home, she did have freedom. Like if she was hungry, she could get something to eat, or, she could freely play, or, just things that we all take for granted. she didn't have those freedoms. She's like, every step she took, she was corrected. And so she had no freedom at home, and then she would go to school and she'd get in trouble because she had some freedoms there. And then if she got in trouble at school, and then she would come home and then she would be punished even more. So she didn't have a life. And she was exposed to all kinds of things that no child should be exposed to. And this kind of unraveled over time. But when she first came, like her siblings were so excited to have her back. They had been praying for her for years to have her come back. And here she comes back. And I guess in their mind, they're still expecting a baby because she was a baby when she left. But she,
She came
definitely,
back traumatized 7-year-old.
Yes, a very traumatized 7-year-old. And I had no idea like what things triggered her. And it's like everything would be going along fine, and then all of a sudden she'd be like having a tantrum, or like, kicking and screaming. I mean, the F-bomb suddenly became just dropped in our home all the time. And I was like, we don't talk like that. And it's like, choose your battles, and so we knew that we needed some extra help for sure. And you were doing I learned about the connected parenting and all of that, and the connected child. I'd read Karen Purvis's book, and but even though I didn't see a lot in my other two kids, there's still, even things happen in the womb and so on and so forth. And so I was familiar with that. And then you and your husband were doing the connected parenting training, right?
Yes.
Locally.
Yeah, Wayne and I became Empowered to Connect parent trainers, and we were doing
Yes.
9-week course or
Yeah.
something.
Yep.
We did that with a group of foster and adoptive parents, and I remember you and Doug took that. So
Yes.
and you found that to be helpful.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because, I learned, I understood that we needed to connect with her. She needed to earn trust with us and so on. But, some of the like more practical things I learned is like, instead of giving her like a time out, we gave her time in, and so we would just have her like, here, just sit on this stool in the kitchen while mom's doing this and just take a break, just, or, whatever, or even to like, give her a favorite, like her little Lammy, or her favorite, like comfort thing, and just, let's just breathe together. Let's, and, just try to help her process her feelings, and she became very introspective. She could talk really good about her trauma, but even now, she still struggles with her reactions to things, and she still has triggers. And, she's had therapy and so on and so forth, but, it's still a long haul, and, each of my kids are different, and they all have to be addressed in a different way.
Yeah. And I get to observe you frequently because we know each other, we live near each other, and you're doing a fabulous job. In spite of the fact that your family suffered another devastating loss a few years ago. Share that.
Well, it was 4 years ago in January, and I was actually taking a little respite, a little self-care time at my girlfriend's house. Me and 2 or 3 other girlfriends decided to go to our friend's house and have a sleepover, have a grown-up girl sleepover. And so, it was just a time of, we made a meal together, fellowship, worship, prayer, just sharing, that type of thing, and sleeping over. And then, we were just going to get up and have breakfast in the morning and probably do a little more worship and stuff and then come home. And I got a phone call from Nathan, and I figured out how old they were at the time. Oh, Nathan was 13 at the time. And I get a phone call from him saying, Mom, Dad's not feeling good and he wants you to come home. And I'm like, okay. So I knew that was a little unusual. So I was home in like 10, 15 minutes or less. And my husband was upstairs, and Nathan actually Doug had him massaging like his shoulders and his neck, and he just had a lot of pain in his back and stuff. And he was massaging him, and Doug was uncomfortable lying down and so on. And for some reason, I left my phone downstairs. The landline wasn't, there. And I'm like, well, I think I got to go downstairs and call 911, 911. So I go downstairs, and I think Nate had, gone into his room or whatever. And I heard a very heavy breath and very, very loud. And I called 911, and he was having a heart attack. And, pretty intense. He turned, purple and everything. And so I call 911, and they're telling me to, do CPR, but he was lying on his bed. And poor Nate, I had to ask poor 13-year-old Nate to help get his father on the floor so we could administer CPR until the EMTs came. So we did that, and they did revive him, and he went to the hospital. But it took several days for them, and they did this whole freezer thing. They, do this cryo thing and try to freeze your brain a little bit and so on. But it took about 5 or 6 days for them to realize that he had lost too much oxygen. There really wasn't any brain function, and he was gone, just like that. And so I became a widow with 3 kiddos at the time, 16, 13, and 11-year-olds. And yeah, I know that was a trauma for our whole entire family. All of us. I know it was quite a trauma for Nathan, and he still hasn't really talked about it. He doesn't want to talk about it. And he's kind of stuffed it, which isn't good. I know it's not good, and so on. But it definitely had an effect on our family. I mean, the first year, any widow could tell you, no matter when it happens, that, definitely the first year, you're just walking through life, and you're just going through the motions. And it wasn't good. I mean, Hope was 16 at the time. She was in 10th grade. She had suffered this loss of her father. 1 year previous, she had been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And so she was still dealing with that. And then she ended up in the hospital 2 more times with gastric issues and just other things maybe related to type 1 diabetes, but maybe not. And learn more about all that later too. But so she ended up actually dropping out of high school. And I didn't have enough brains at the time to say, well, I can homeschool her. But I also realized I probably couldn't have homeschooled her at the time. But she ended up just leaving school. And so she really struggled after that. She got into a pretty bad relationship by the time she was 17 and into 18. And gratefully that ended. But, she was abused and, in a very controlling relationship. And I just didn't know because I was just trying to keep myself together. And, Nate, it was kind of at the tail end of COVID when all that happened. And so the other two were in school, out of school, the homeschool, back and forth. So, it's been a journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know you're going to share more about how the Lord has helped you navigate all of that, but I'm going to
Yes.
interject another question here, because somewhere along the way over the past few years, you learned about FASD, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder,
You
because that's a
did.
part of your story as well. So
Yes.
how did you learn about FASD?
Well, from you. I mean, I remember realizing that your two youngest had FAS,
Mhm.
which I learned was under the FASD umbrella. But my friend has a desire to open up a healing farm for probably kids in foster care or kids from hard places. And so she had a group of people who were interested in helping with that vision, that mission. And so she did a series of, she had a bunch of speakers come in over a course of a couple months. And one of them was you. And you did like an introduction to FASD. And I think that was like maybe 2022, maybe, I'm thinking.
So I don't know the date either.
Yeah, I don't know. I was trying to timeline it a little bit, but that seems about right. Like,
Yeah, about
and
3 years.
yeah. So, and I'm like sitting there and I'm like, I knew Nathan had ADHD
Mhm.
and we knew that maybe there was a little bit more going on, but I didn't really know. And then you were doing this training and you started to go over you know, the primary characteristics, the secondary characteristics of FASD. And I'm like, wait a minute, like the light bulb went on. Like, I think that's what Nathan has. Because there was the whole, a little bit of dysmaturity and the slower processing. He'd always be like, stop interrupting me. You'd think he was done talking and he was just needed to take time to gather his thoughts. And he was horrible in math. He could not do math to save his life. He still can't. And, can't read a clock, a regular analog clock, didn't understand, time, like totally time blind. But in other ways, he was like when he was younger, he was very, very neat and everything had to be neat and orderly. And if you interrupted him, he'd have to start all at the beginning all over again. Even with a conversation, he'd have to start at the beginning all over again because he would lose track of where he was. And I'm like, and then the secondary characteristics were, those avoidance kinds of things. Like I was seeing that at school, like he'd get up and he would, he'd be found wandering the halls, or he would go into the boys' room, or, just different things. Or, very argumentative with me. And I'm like, why are you arguing with me? But I didn't understand that he wasn't understanding, or that he was really frustrated because he didn't get the whole picture. And, so that really started me really looking into this more in depth.
Yeah. And then you took the deep dive, which is the facets. It used to be 18 hours, now it's 15 hours, but it's like 6 3-hour
Yeah,
session.
I took that freebie with you, and then I took whatever the next one was, like maybe 3 or 6 hours, and then I'm like, all right, I'm gonna take the deep dive and the 18 hour. And that was really good because we really were able to like look into the behaviors, what was going on. Oh, so we use the different charts and graphs and stuff, and just kind of like, all right, here's what's going on. What does he need to be able to do this? Say I've asked him to clean his room, and the skills that are required to do that, the executive functioning, he's got to be able to he has to be able to look at the big picture and say, okay, I need to pick up the trash, I need to take care of my laundry, I need to take care of the dirty dishes, I need to make my bed, all these things that and I can make them a list, but it was still like overwhelming. All the executive functioning skills that he would need just to do that, clean your room, and to look at that. And I would think about his experience in school and what the teachers would be expecting of him. And he was expected to sit still in that classroom and just listen. And if you can't process everything that's coming in, it's like wah, 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 wah. And then he can't,
You're not catching it all if you have
no,
that.
he's not catching it all. It's like he's catching every other. And so he's not understanding. And then he's more and more frustrated. And then, he's, expected to like take notes, and he can't take notes because it's like, that's way too much going on. And, just, and I really, I know that was another question along the line, but I really struggled with him in school because Nathan looked and acted like a regular teenager, a regular middle school kid, a regular teenager, and, high-fiving his buddies and he,
Yeah, and I know him, right? So he's tall, he's handsome, he's
yes,
friendly, he's funny, he's engaging, he has
yes,
friends. And, and I'm picturing him now because now I know like he's high school age and things began to deteriorate in high school.
yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I really noticed actually when he was still in private school and he was in 5th grade, and the 5th and 6th grade were combined. And day one, the teacher said, okay, pull out your notebook and write a paragraph about, your summer. He could not do it. He absolutely could not do it. It was all up there. He could not get it from here, to the paper. And he would be the kind of kid where he wanted to make his letters just right. And if he couldn't make his letters just right, he would erase everything. I would always see pieces of paper with that were ripped because he had erased so much. And that teacher, gratefully, she was actually familiar with neurodiversity because she had a neurodiverse son. He was on the autism spectrum. And she was the first one to say, I think there's something else going on here. And so that was
before you knew about FASD.
Yeah, that was before I knew about FASD. I just thought maybe there's a little autism spectrum going on here or whatever on top of the ADHD. And so I finally got him, through the school district there, I got him evaluated. They found that he, he's good with communication. He was actually pretty good with reading comprehension, social skills way up there, but math and abstract learning, not so much, a little, slower in the processing, all of those things were there and identified, but this small private school said, we cannot accommodate him. We cannot provide the extra support that he needs. and that school district couldn't pull somebody from their school to come to, that school to help him. So we got through 5th grade somehow. And in 6th grade, I determined to put him into the public school. Yeah. And we started with a 504, and then we were able to switch it over to an IEP. And actually, middle school wasn't too bad for him. I mean, passing classes and so on, but he had, I think he had more support in a way. They were able to provide some of the accommodations that he needed, and also through 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, it was the same like special ed or whatever. Teachers were able to like kind of like follow him and be with him. So I'm thinking, all right, good. So let's take all these wonderful things that we've learned and all the supports that he's gotten through middle school, and let's transfer them to high school. Well, no. And, he wasn't disabled enough to be in a self-contained classroom, which I didn't think would be a good thing for him anyway. But basically what they did in the high school was they took all the kids who had an IEP, threw them all in the same classroom with one extra co-teacher. So you got the regular teacher, and then the special ed teacher is there with like 6 to 8 kids with IEPs and expected to help all those kids. And that's just a recipe for disaster. And then, he had like the resource room and so on, which was good, like, okay, in 9th grade. And so we got through 9th grade. He had this one special ed teacher in the resource room who really connected with him. It was a man, which I thought was good. And so then, okay, we start 10th grade, and I'm like, well, where's that guy? Oh, he's only for the 9th graders who have to start with a new one for 10th grade, and then a new one for 11th grade. And I'm like, what? That makes no sense. Why can't that person, that case manager, they call them the case manager or special ed, why can't they follow that individual all 4 years so that there's smooth transitions, and you can take what you've learned about this student and transfer it and tell the new teachers about, that grade teachers about, this is how we help Nate. This is what he needs.
Advocate for him. Yeah.
To advocate for him. And so, nope, that's not how we do it. Like, well, why not? And so he, he was already, dealing with the loss of his dad and not having a father figure. And I know he was struggling with, thinking he needed to be the man of the house, which he didn't. But, I did have I probably had more expectations for him in terms of, chores and helping out and so on and so forth, which, was hard. And it was like he would come home from school and he would be exhausted, absolutely exhausted. And there was no way I'm going to get any homework out of him.
Right.
He's not going to do homework. Right. And so I did at least get the IEP, for most of the teachers to say, okay, no extra work. And some of them were like, no, he has to do it. And I'm like, he ain't going to do it. And so he was like, failing a lot of his courses, and he would just come home every day just saying, I'm stupid. I'm an idiot. I'm done. I don't even want to live anymore. And I'm like, no, this isn't, and plus he was getting in trouble because he would get up and he would leave the class, because he would get overwhelmed. It would be like, wah, wah, wah. And he's like, I hope they don't call on me. And he would get up and leave. He would ask permission, get up and leave. But then he would either wander the hall, which is a big no-no, obviously, or he would go to the boys' room. But what's going on in the boys' room is there's the bad boys, the real troublemakers, who are offering him vapes or offering him dab pens, and poor impulse control, wanting to fit in. There's your recipe for the next more secondary and even getting into tertiary characteristics of FASD, of, getting in trouble, because, there he's vaping in the bathroom, or even, using the marijuana vape thing. So, and, the other boys wouldn't get in trouble because they knew enough how to, duck and run, but it would
Right.
always be Nate. Nate would get in trouble. And half the time, the principal didn't even call me. He would all of a sudden, he's got in-school suspension, and I didn't even know.
Mm.
And I would try to educate the administrator about FASD, and that got nowhere at all.
Sandra Flach, host of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, and FASD educator Debbie Raymond, invite you to join Hope for the FASD Journey, a virtual support community for parents and caregivers raising individuals with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, diagnosed or not. This faith-based support community meets online 3 times each month, features special VIP guests, and a private Facebook group for members only, which includes Soul Care Saturday video devotionals led by Sandra and Deb. Both Sandra and Deb are adoptive moms raising kids with FASD and facilitators of the Facets neurobehavioral model. For details and to register, visit justicefororphansny.org/hope-community. That's justicefororphansny.org/hope-community.
So yeah, I wanted to ask you, Sue, about, because I'm familiar with this story, because as you began to learn about FASD and began to understand that that was probably what was going on with Nate, because you knew enough of his early history, the birth mom
Yes.
and all that, to know that that's very highly likely the scenario.
Right.
And you began to sort of advocate about that at the school.
Yes.
How did that go over with the school?
Well, I talked to, he still had some relationship with, the one special ed teacher who had been his case manager, and he understood, and he was willing to look into it and learn about it, and maybe one other person, special ed teacher, and she was kind of on my side, but the majority of the regular education teachers were like, no, this is just behavior. He's got to do this, this, and this. He's got to stop. He has to stop being late. He has to stop wanting to leave early. He has to stop leaving the classroom. And I'm like, you don't understand. He's late because, number one, of sensory issues. He wants to wear his noise canceling headphones to go down the hallway. He wants to be able to focus and concentrate and get where he's going. And he will go and he would go into the resource officer's office, his room, and wait until they were done passing class. And then he would go to his class because it was too overstimulating
Right.
to be in the hallway. And it's like, why can't you accommodate him there? Oh, no, he can't be late. So, and then he would want to leave early. And it's like, well, no, you can't leave early because you have to write down this assignment. And he's like, well, just give it to me. And so then they say, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, no, give it to me. It's like, they wouldn't even give him an index card and say, here's the assignment.
Right.
And
They expect him to write it down
right,
because
right.
a
Even though it said in his IEP, number one, he should sit a little bit closer to the thing. You need to check that he's comprehending. You need to give him a break if he needs to break a break. And you need to give him, notes because he can't take notes. And you need to give him this information, in his schedule book or whatever, and write down his assignment book and write down his assignments for him. That was in his IEP. And half of them didn't do it. They didn't know. So,
and this is with FASD being an invisible brain-based condition.
yes.
Nate presents like a neurotypical kiddo, right? He looks like all the other kids.
Absolutely, right.
He's not
And
into
then I
self.
ran into the issue that, well, you don't have a diagnosis. All we have to go by is ADHD.
Right.
And I'm like, well, it's still a neurodiversity. You still can help him. You still can do these things. And they, I remember having a meeting. We had to have a meeting, all the teachers and stuff. And actually I had you, chime in on the phone. And the administrator said, well, he doesn't look like he has FASD. And I'm like, Sandra, would you like to address that?
And one of them also said that that can only be diagnosed at birth, because since he didn't have a diagnosis at that point, they wouldn't even acknowledge it. And then because he was, a teenager, they just had misinformation and didn't
Yes.
really understand at all. And I did want to point out that Nate wasn't in a self-contained classroom. He
No.
switched classes and went through the day like all of the other students, even though he had the IEP. So every different teacher was sort of
Yes.
interpreting the IEP and applying it however they felt like, which was
Yes.
consistent and not helpful.
Exactly. So, shortly after that meeting, we decided to homeschool. And, we did homeschool. I think we had started one year, and I don't even remember. It's all a fog. It's like we did like half year here and then homeschool. And then he's like, Mom, I think I can do it. I think I've matured enough. I can handle it. I know what I got to do. Da, 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 da. And I'm like, okay. And so I talked to all them and let's get this IEP going again. And then, it was for 11th grade, I think. And
He went back, but that
he
didn't.
went back, and then it didn't take long before he was out. And then for 12th grade, we just did complete homeschool. And
So but he finally did get a diagnosis, even though from the pediatrician to the school, nobody was listening, nobody was believing
no,
you.
not the pediatrician at all. I'm like,
Yeah.
so yes. So I knew about, I tried to find somebody in the Capital District, and I had no luck with that, even though I had several referrals. And they're like, no, he was too old at that time, because he was like, I was started when he was like 16, trying to find a diagnosis. And then I tried to get into Rochester, Dr. Christy Petrenko, and she had like a 18-month to 2-year waiting list. And she was the one who recommended a doctor down in New York.
Down in the city.
In New York City at Cornell Wheel Hospital. And
so you had to go from Albany, New York,
yes,
down to New York City,
yes,
just to pursue,
to get a diagnosis.
and
Yes.
you got one. Tell us about that.
I did. So that was actually last fall. He was 17 years old. And yep. And I was already homeschooling him and everything. But we took the train down, and his older sister came, which was wonderful, because she was a real asset, because she had reconnected with, the kids have an older sibling, and she's in her early 30s, and same biological mom. And so she knew her, and her mom abandoned the family when she was like 8 or 9 or whatever. But she definitely remembers her mom being a user and definitely drank and so on and so forth. And so was able to be there to confirm that, yes, Mom most likely did drink. And so that helped. And so I was very grateful to have her there and to be a support for Nate. But he doesn't have any of the facial characteristics. He did all kinds of like physical things, and they did genetic testing to rule out other things, Fragile X or different things, and he didn't have any of those. But he definitely gave him a diagnosis of FAND, which is fetal alcohol neurodevelopmental disorder, I believe. Sorry, you know that.
Was it ARND, the alcohol-related neurodevelopmental?
ARND. Yes, I think so. ARND.
One of those,
Alcohol related.
yeah, there's like 4 or 5 different
Yes.
actual diagnoses under the umbrella of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. And my boys have the fetal alcohol syndrome, the FAS, because they have the full-on facial features and
Right.
all the symptoms, whereas Nate doesn't have the facial features, so he has a different diagnosis, but still on the spectrum.
Under that umbrella, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure, for
Mhm.
sure. So he got that at 7? Was he 16 or 17 when he got that diagnosis?
17.
17.
Yep.
And how has that made a difference at all?
He doesn't really talk about it very much. Every once in a while, he gets frustrated with himself. There was one time when he just kind of had a little breakdown and he's like, I wish I didn't have this, and that kind of, why doesn't my brain work the way everybody else's brain works? And, just those kinds of things. But I think it does help him to know that this is why his brain doesn't work the way that other people's brains work, that he has that brain-based difference. And I think that as he grows and matures, he'll find that to be more valuable. And I'm hoping that he'll want to know more about it and learn more about it.
Yeah. What are some of Nate's strengths?
Oh man, he's well, he's definitely social. He's gregarious. He's very thoughtful. I think in some ways he's kind of intuitive, whereas some people kind of like miss social cues. And so like my youngest, she misses social cues, and it's like, and he doesn't. And he's very keen on, he can tell when I'm a little bit off or whatever. And so I think that's a strength that he has for sure. Just that sensitivity, that compassion for others. He's, giving, kind, giving. He loves music. He loves to download beats and like make raps and so on. And he's also mechanically minded. He likes to take stuff apart and try to put things together. And he loves anything that's got wheels. So but
And he's had a job because he's a dishwasher at a
yes.
local restaurant, which he's had that job for a number of years,
Yes,
right?
3 years. This is his 3rd year now. Yep.
Well, Sue, I've had the opportunity over the years to really see your 3 kids interact with each other. And I'm just always blessed by how much they love each other. And I know as the mom, you see the squabbles and the sibling things, but I've seen them be very caring for each other and very, just they're close.
Yeah.
And how they express that fondness for one another.
Yeah. I think Doug and I had always, tried to model that scripture verse of don't let the sun go down on your anger. And we would always just say that we loved each other. And, even if they saw Doug and I have an altercation or a disagreement, we would always, eventually we would just hold hands and pray and hug and tell each other that we loved each other. And I think we really modeled that for the kids. We would just always be, you can't go to bed without, saying that you love each other.
Yeah, and I see kids doing that. I see them hug each other. I see them hug you, and be, expressive that way, but also verbally say that they love each other and love you. So I love that.
Yeah. And one thing about Rosie is that, for the longest time, she was not very physical, not very huggy. And just of late, she has been coming to me and wanting to be hugged. And that's interesting because she can be very bristly and tire me out. So obviously I think she has a little fetal alcohol effect as well on top of the trauma. And so, there's that confabulation that kind of goes on, and the storytelling, and the, and the executive functioning stuff is there. And believe it or not, she's really good with math, go figure, because, everyone's different. And, and she's really struggles with the reading comprehension and that type of thing. But she can be really, kind of one of her side diagnoses is reactive attachment disorder, which is understandable. And then ODD. I mean, I know that some kids with ODD are extremely explosive. She's like all the time, but she's not, but she is definitely explosive. I mean, she's broken plenty of dishes here and one day she like opened up the front door and threw a glass out the door. I'm like, okay. And it was like in the middle of the winter and we didn't even know it until we saw like, what's all this glass out here? But so she's, she's not always easy to embrace and, give the warm fuzzies to.
And it's taken 10 years, right? Because she's 17 now. She came back to you
She's 16 now. Yep. So yeah. So it's been like 9 years.
9 years. You
Yeah.
poured into her before. Now she's finally ready to reciprocate, the affection. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so at first when she wanted a hug, it felt uncomfortable. I'm like, okay, just because she's, but they're all at different places.
So you're a member of our Hope for the FASD Journey online support community.
Yes.
What has the group meant to you to be part of that?
Well, first of all, I think it's really, really helpful because we're all so real with each other and we can be transparent and we can just tell it like it is. And I really, really appreciate that, to have that place, that safe place where you can, say what's going on and how you're feeling, and that, admitting that, you didn't know what you didn't know. And so you made mistakes. And, we all know that we made mistakes. And I appreciate that there's a lot of members of the group who also have older, teens and young adults and going into adulthood. And, so we can all relate to getting that late diagnosis kind of thing and, the struggles that we had ahead of time. And so a lot of us have kind of similar parallel stories in that regard. And, just trying to do things the traditional way and realizing that you can't do things the traditional way. And then I love the fact that there's, some members who have littles who have been fortunate enough to get that early diagnosis, and they're on there now and they're learning. And it's like, you are so much more ahead of the game. And to realize that we actually have something to impart, some encouragement that we can give to them and to each other. It's like, one mom, talked about how one of her kids, eloped, ran away. And then it's like 2 or 3 of us chimed in. It's like, oh yeah, my son did that, or my daughter did that. And, it's like, okay, it's all part of it, and the anxiety and, how you feel about the fact that, your kid with a disability, just like, ran away, just like took off on a bicycle, or, I found out that I won't even go there, but
you got to be in the group to get those details, right?
yes. Yeah.
Well, I know one of the things, because I remember we had we have a once a month, we have a VIP guest,
Yes.
to and share their story. And it's usually a lot of times it's a parent, sometimes it's a professional. And I distinctly remember when Patty Casper was
Oh
our
my
VIP
gosh.
guest. And I remember as Patty was sharing her story, I remember seeing your face in the little, Zoom Brady Bunch boxes and like the light bulb go off in your head because of some things that Patty was talking about. You want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, I'd never obviously really met she was an adult with FASD. She's got, I don't know how many like degrees and advanced degrees and so on. And so smart, an author and so on and so forth. And she shared that she also had FASD and some of her struggles and some of of the things that were going on. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, all my life, I have felt out of sync with my peers. Like, yeah, I did the party thing when I was in, a teenager college, but they all stopped and they carried on with their lives and they, got advanced degrees or they got married or, serious careers, that type of thing. And I kept going.
Partying.
Yeah, I didn't stop until I was like 31, and I always had a hard time just staying organized. My jobs that I would have, I would be great at the advocating for the individuals that I served, getting them services, being on the phone, finding stuff for them, talking with the family members and, understand, just research, I loved all that. But man, when it came to paperwork, oh, I I would always get, Sue, you're late on your paperwork again. And, my desk would just be like, like my table looks right now, like something exploded on it. And looking for things. And, I try really hard with systems and it's like, I couldn't stick with the system. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? And I would see other people like all nice and neat and their desks are like all nice and clean. At the end of the day, they put everything away. And I'm like, why can't I do that? I would have to like physically take like the laptop that they gave you. I'd have to bring my big bundle of papers. I'd have to like go to like the local library and find like a cubicle and sit and do my paperwork, hyper focused. And that's how I got through college, I realized, is that I would go like to the library or the basement of the dorm and find that little cubicle and do my work. And I was like, even though I was partying back then, I was a perfect 4.0 student because I would just sit there and hyper focus. And I'm like, hyper focus is one of those things. And that executive functioning is one of those things. And time blindness, if you're hyper focused, you become totally time blind. I'm notoriously late. And it's like, oh my gosh, all the things, I have to write the lists. I have to, always writing lists everywhere and, calendars and so on and so forth, whatever I can to help keep me going. And, even raising the kids, we would like, all right, we're going to do this chore chart and we're going to do this and this, or, and I would get it all up and it would be, on the refrigerator and I would slip a day or two and then they would slip. And then I'm like, well, that didn't work. And then we would just give it up. It's like total, and it's like kids need consistency. And it's like, I wasn't consistent. I couldn't be consistent. So, it's a miracle that my eldest daughter is as organized and and on time and all. She has those skills that I don't have.
But
I need a body double when I need to, if I can't, I really, really have a hard time doing stuff, doing like a big task alone.
Yeah.
I need somebody with me to say, come on, Sue, we're doing this, and that
The next.
light bulb came on with me, and I connected with Patty, and probably about 18 months ago or so, maybe 2 years, I don't know, but we started meeting online like every week, and we really started to break down the whole neurobehavioral model and where I fit into it and my own personal expectations of what I expected. And I had to stop comparing myself with other people and accepting me for who I was, and also identifying it's okay to need help in some things. And it's okay that you have lists and post-it notes everywhere, you know? And
Whatever accommodations you need, right? To be
yeah,
safe.
exactly. And so, even at my job, sometimes they're like, Sue, you're doing this, we're doing this.
And you're the boss.
I'm the boss.
You're the-
Because I'll be like, ooh, they're like, no, doing this.
And we'll get to your job in a minute, but I
I
also
know. But also another thing that I learned with Patty, another light bulb that went off was the fact that Patty was type 1 diabetic. My daughter is type 1 diabetic. And
Right.
my daughter has got all kinds of she's been tested for like every autoimmune disorder under the sun, and we still don't exactly know everything that's going on with her, because we learned that there are over 450 comorbid conditions, you know, um, medical conditions that could come with FASD. It's not just your brain, it's while those organs were being developed. So while her pancreas and immune system was being developed, mom was probably drinking.
Yeah. And our listeners you could Google or search if you put in FASD, I think it's 428 comorbidities. There's scientific research, there's articles,
Yes.
lists
Yes.
that, among the population of people who were prenatally exposed to alcohol, there
Yes.
is, um, this common thread of these different conditions, co-concurring health conditions. So not saying that somebody with FASD has all of them, or that,
Right. But you can, yeah. I mean, my son, he got diagnosed with a hernia, like youngish,
and
and
that's one of
and
the,
that was one. And it was funny because we was listening to maybe a podcast with the developer, the ones who did this research, and they were sitting around the table saying, wait, I had a hernia. No, I've got type 1. Oh, I've got, eczema. I have this autoimmune disease. And they're like, wait a minute.
yeah.
And that's kind of like what spearhead. It was the change makers.
Yeah, and and yes, that's what they spearheaded the research, because
Yes.
there's just, among the population of people prenatally exposed, there's a high prevalence of these various other health conditions that are highly prevalent among that population. So and a lot of times that's what parents will start realizing, that, oh, my kid has like these other things that could also possibly be related. So there's that too. So, but just circle back around to yourself for a moment.
Okay.
How did it make sense to you, knowing your history, your birth history, that you could have been prenatally exposed to alcohol?
Well, it definitely helped a lot. I think because like I said, I always felt like I was out of sync with my peers, and that, how come I couldn't get it? And it, it's very common that people with FASD, you mature at a different rate. And it seems like it's in the 30s that they really start to kind of like be a little bit more caught up. And I was like, well, that makes perfect sense, because that's when I got sober and went into AA, and then developed my relationship with the Lord. And so, but just, looking back on all of that, it just made so much makes so much more sense for me, and I can be, I can give myself more grace. And I have a clear understanding of, who I am and who I was created to be, instead of being angry with my mom because she didn't know.
Back to, we don't know what we don't know.
Exactly. And,
Back,
back then, doctors were telling pregnant women that it was okay to have a couple drinks,
yeah.
which
Yeah.
is you're like, what? But it was just commonplace.
In the
And
60s,
so,
50s, it was very culturally acceptable to
absolutely.
have a cocktail when you got home
Yeah.
from work or before dinner or after
Mhm,
dinner.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
it, and doctors were telling women that they could
Yeah.
safely have a drink or two each day. So, and that's why I feel like it's way more prevalent than anybody even realizes, because,
Yes.
all of us who are adults now, it was just, there's probably so many more people affected.
Right.
And it's still happening today, because even now, doctors aren't specifically telling pregnant women to not drink alcohol.
No, no. And that really bothers me.
Yeah. I have a daughter who's expecting, and she was her first baby, and she was very distraught that she was told she can't have um sushi, because she's a big sushi eater, can't have raw fish. And so she was like not happy about that. And I'm like, but did they tell you to not have alcohol? And she was like, oh, no. I'm like, oh, okay, okay. So a lot of
Yeah.
work we have yet to do, but it's,
Yes.
we know that right now it's 1 in 20, individuals in the United States have been prenatally exposed. We know it's very hard to get a diagnosis. Many are not
Mhm.
diagnosed. And the 1 in 20 is a pretty conservative number. Uh,
Yes.
Moving forward, we'll be shocked to see that it is even more prevalent than that. So I'm glad that you've found some hope and some support in the
Yeah.
support group, because I know it's one of my favorite things to connect with
Yeah.
all too. So my next question for you is because you brought up at work, and we will put links in the show notes to where our listeners can learn more about the workshops and the support group. But a little bit about ReFurnishings. If you guys follow on social media, maybe you've seen this. But we opened a furniture thrift store in Ravenna, New York, where Sue and I are from, over a year ago, and
Mhm.
it provides, gently used secondhand furniture and housewares. With our goal is we donate the furniture. The furniture is donated to us, but we turn around and donate it to our churches who are serving families in the care portal. But we also
Right.
sell furniture to the general public to create funding for Justice for Orphans, which is this podcast comes under that umbrella of JFO, and as does Refurnishing. So Sue is the fabulous manager, because we talk about FASD and we've got a lot of struggles, but we all have strengths. And let me tell you, you are a brilliant
Oh,
vintage, antique furniture. Like, you just know your stuff. Like, I get to take the pictures for social media. That's my claim to fame. And I'll go in and you'll be like, oh, did you see this dresser? It's a dovetail drawered, whatever wood, Drexel, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh, that's nice. Like, I have no idea what that is, but you like know all of the things. So, I'll brag on you, because you just are so good at what you do. But tell us a little bit about the store.
wow. Well, you pretty much described what it is, but it's interesting because it all like fell into place because we were talking about the need for a funding stream, and then at the same time you've gotten these donations, and your storage unit was overflowing, and it's like, what are we going to do? And I'm like, we should have a furniture store, we should have a used furniture store. So, and from the very beginning, I was on Facebook, I was like picking stuff up off the side of the road even before the store opened. And as soon as we had a space, as soon as we knew we had a space and it was going to open, I was like gathering things already. But um and God really, really blessed us with a grant so that I could be hired part-time as the manager. And I had a little bit of retail experience, not a lot, but my I come from a long line of collectors and thrifters and stuff, and it's funny because being a believer, being a Christian, part of that is not to be materialistic or whatever. And so I've always struggled with, what do I do? I shouldn't really be collecting a lot of stuff or whatever. I want to be getting rid of things, so but I have all that knowledge, and I recognize things, and I know how to look things up and learn about things, and I love the history of things and so on. And so it was a really good fit because I could gather all of these things and I didn't have to bring them home. And they could be in the store.
A whole store full of those things.
Yes. And I guess part of why I'm good at what I do is because I find pleasure in these things, in these items, and their history or whatever. And I can impart that to people who come in and tell them about stuff, and so I can make it an enjoyable experience. I'm not, you don't come in and I'm not sitting on my phone or whatever. I'm like, I like to greet people and see
Or
what
you're rehabbing
they're
something.
after, and yeah, and what they're looking for, and give them ideas. And I don't know, it just seems like it's a good fit and it's enjoyable, and you want to do work that you find enjoyable. I've been a stay-at-home mom ever since Nate was, what, I don't know, maybe a year, if that. That's how I've been a stay-at-home mom for like 17 years. So, and doing, different things, but yeah, I just
And just to see how the Lord brought it all together, because I know,
yes.
when I was the executive director of Justice for Orphans, fundraising is a huge part of running a nonprofit, and we were getting offers to give us all this furniture. We didn't have a place to put it, and we needed.
Right.
So we were, the Lord was sort of putting together this whole idea of this furniture thrift store. And every once in a while, I would share it with you when we would go for a walk or something. Because many years ago, when we were a young organization, you were our bookkeeper, right?
Right. Yep, that's right.
Much to your dismay, because it wasn't your favorite thing to do, but you were on the board and you were very helpful. And so when we would meet, you'd be like, oh yeah, that would be such a great idea to have, and I would love to work there. I remember distinctly you telling, and I was like, oh sure, like I had never store or a thrift store or that kind of thing. But the Lord just really, in His purpose, brought this thing together to where not only is it an answer to our prayers for justice for orphans, it was an answer to your prayer because you were praying about something like this, a job, right? It was
absolutely, absolutely. And we did. I'm a big fan of Home and Gardens flea market flip, and we actually did our first thrift and flip, which was a lot of fun. And we got 14 teams of people to come and select a piece of furniture off the floor and take it home and flip it and upcycle it and create something of it. And then we had an auction, and it was online and then in person, and it was a lot of fun. And people are like, will you do it again? And we're like, yeah, we'll do it again. And so that was really cool. I really really enjoyed that, and I was happy to see my idea just go become something, turn into something.
Yeah. And you've got some incredible volunteers that dedicate their time to helping in the store. And then we got another grant. We were able to hire a part-time person to help you. So it's just we've just seen God do some tremendous things. And, so we've got vintage furniture and everyday stuff and antique stuff, collectibles. So if anybody's interested, if this is your kind of thing, you can check out our social media, which is ReFurnishings. We're on both Facebook and Instagram. We have an eBay store now.
Mhm.
And if
That's
you
right.
happen to be in the upstate New York, Capital Region, Hudson Valley area, and you want to check us out, what's the address of the store, Sue?
2484 Route 9W in Ravenna.
Yeah, so you can stop by and see Sue at any time because she's there doing a fabulous job. And check it out on our. We'll put a link in the show notes so our listeners can find it. It's on the Justice website as well. But Sue, you picked out the scripture that I read today, which was Psalm 23. What does the 23rd Psalm mean to you?
Well, it's funny. Well, actually, when I was trying to think of a scripture, the first one that came to mind was trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will make your path straight. And that's the scripture that I've had as a, life forever. But the 23rd Psalm, just the Lord is my shepherd, I will not be in want. It's like he guides me, he leads me, and he makes me to, he restores my soul. He makes me to lie down in green pastures because sometimes we need to remember soul care and we need to be made to do it. We need to, it's like, and God is like, just step back. Just, you need to relax. I've got this. We got this together. I'm with you. I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you. And yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Just to know that even through, really, really devastatingly hard times, I'm not ever abandoned. And he is my hope. And he is my comfort. He is my shield. He is my friend. He is my husband. He is my father. He is my all in all. And, and I think about, he prepares a table before me in the midst of my enemies. And it's like, I have overcome anybody else's naysaying, negativity, your son this, your son that, your daughter, yada, yada, yada. I don't care. I have the Lord on my side. And you can say whatever you want, but this is the way it is. And the battle is the Lord's, for sure.
I love that. Love that. And you've overcome so much. You've walked through so much as a foster and adoptive mom, the trials that you've faced. We're still in it, right? You all
Yes.
three of your kids are still at home. So
Mhm,
like
mhm.
we're still parenting these kiddos who have these struggles, and we're advocating for them and loving them and still raising them. So, and Sue, because you listen to this podcast, so our listeners are like us,
Mhm.
adoptive moms, adoptive parents, navigating all of this stuff. So as we close, would you just offer us some words of encouragement?
Well, there is definitely help out there. And, Sandra provides a lot of it. And there's a lot of resources available. And, there's a great book, Trying Differently Rather Than Harder, second edition, very good. And, Embracing Zach, I'm telling everybody to read that book by Jody Cope. So put that in your show notes. And that's just a lot about brain-based differences in general. And so there is a lot of help out there, and there's probably more people than you realize that are going through this struggle. It's like, I think it's important that we find our tribe, so to speak. And I love the fact that our support group is faith-based and that we pray for each other, and that's really helpful. And then I guess the other thing is that there's hope. Don't ever, ever, ever give up. Don't give up hope. Don't give up trying. And it's like, if you have a lousy day, So you all have lousy days, or you have a lousy week or a month or whatever. It's okay. It's okay. Just trust in the Lord. And, I have always found it so helpful just to find a scripture and memorize it and keep it in your heart. And my kids have that too. It's like they've got a scripture, and that they can remember, and I'll remind them of their scripture.
Because God's word will not return void.
That's right. That's right. That is right. So.
Well, Sue, thank you so much for stepping out and sharing your story. Thank you for all that you're doing as you advocate for your kiddos and others in the FASD community, and managing refurnishings and all the incredible stuff that you're doing in our community. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening to this episode of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey. I hope that my conversation with Sue Roseberger was an encouragement to you. And of course, we always like to not just encourage you here on this podcast, but equip you for your parenting journey. You heard Sue and I talk about the Adoption and Foster Care Journey. Well, not the Adoption and Foster Care Journey. We have so many things with so many different names, and I'm trying to get them all straight, but the Hope for the FASD Journey Support Community, we talked about that. If that resonated with you, check that out on our website, as well as every month I do offer a free intro to FASD. So if any of the things that Sue and I were talking about, if you felt like, well, they're talking about my kid, right? If you want to learn a little bit more, I do a free 1-hour online live intro to FASD workshop every month. And then I have other longer versions if you wanted to do a deep dive like we talked about. Maybe you want some one-on-one parent coaching. We have all of these different ways that you can learn more about fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, and not just learn about them, but get equipped to be able to help your child with understanding how their brain works differently and what accommodations that they might need to help them be successful. And so we want to equip you with that. All of our workshops, the support group, everything you can find online at our website, justicefororphansny.org. Check all of those out. Remember that we also have a video version of this podcast on the Justice for Orphans YouTube channel. So if you want to watch the video, you can do that there. And I blog at sandraflach.com, as well as everything on our website and our social media. Don't forget the Adoption and Foster Care Journey pages that I mentioned earlier. And if you've listened all the way to the end, wow, great job sticking with us. I'm grateful to have you along for the journey, and I'll catch you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, brought to you by Justice for Orphans. We hope you were encouraged today. Please be sure to subscribe to this podcast and leave a review, and share it with your fellow foster and adoptive parent friends so they can be encouraged too. Be sure to find and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Justice for Orphans, and check out our website for vital resources at justicefororphansny.org.